Goombas solve climate change? Okay, so apparently there's no research to be done on this one, like in my What Kind of Mushroom is Toad video. There is an answer. They're shiitakes. But in Japan, their literal name means chestnut people, so let's talk about that instead. Put simply, if they were real chestnuts, how big would that tree be? But for this one, I actually am going to need an assistant. Hello, Professor. Come here. Please welcome visiting Professor Maxwell House Coffee. Why does it always go back to frogs in my video? The frog is significantly furrier than I had expected. You stinker! I've decided to fire my lab assistant. Based on my very serious smart lady research, I have determined that Goombas are usually about half of Mario's height. Now, assuming that Mario is the short king I know him to be deep in my heart, that puts him at about 5'5". Turn that into inches and we have... So how big is an ordinary chestnut? Well, naturally depends on where you are. Sorry, depends on when you are. There are two major species of chestnut tree that produce edible fruit. The first is the Chinese chestnut tree. This is the one that produced every single chestnut you have ever seen or eaten. The American chestnut tree, the reason we sing the lyric from that thing you're thinking about, is from when North America was just littered with the thing. All over the eastern United States used to be just covered in American chestnut trees. But you've probably never seen one. Side note, tell the truth. Did you think that chestnuts were roasted on a stick like a marshmallow? Go on, confess. You thought that Nat King Cole was spearing through the heart whole raw chestnuts to spit roast over a fire. Yeah, I did too. I've never seen a real person do this before. That's weird East Coast shit. Anyway, the whole dang species got wiped out by a fungal blight in the early 1900s. So we're just gonna use the Chinese chestnut tree for all of our measurement. Each chestnut is about 1.5 inches tall. The tree at full maturity is about 40 feet tall. Put that all together and we have an 866-foot tree. Is that a lot? That feels like a lot. Well, let's consider Hyperion. Hyperion is the single tallest tree in the world. This awe-inspiring tree is so treasured and protected. Its exact location is not publicly known. Even if I knew where it was, which I don't, if I ever told a soul, the National Park Service Covert Ops Rangers team would come to my house and bisect my legs and shins with a two-man tree saw. But you know, it's like in NorCal somewhere. Anyway, that thing is 360 feet tall. And before I go any further, please recall back to the days that made you the nearsighted sweetheart you are today. And recall that Goombas are occasionally much, much bigger. This is the aptly named Mega Goomba. I estimate him to be about 4 Marios tall. Convert our units, cross multiply, find x. I'm sorry I showed you math, please don't swipe away. And we have a 6,933-foot tree that the Mega Goomba presumably came from. Now that seems like a lot, but is that like how high airplanes fly or the bottom of the Mariana Trench? The Burj Khalifa! Tallest building in the world, jewel-encrusted monument to man's hubris in defiance of both God and gravity. This thing is so stupidly big that the engineers had to develop a whole new method of getting water up to the top floors because no hydraulic pump on the planet could handle the job. It is 2,717 feet tall. My scale bar is now meaningless, so here's the Mega Goomba tree next to Mount Vesuvius. Now, admittedly, Mount Vesuvius is not a particularly tall volcano, but still, it's a tree as big as a volcano! Okay, so Mega Goomba trees are big. Big whoop. Yeah, big whoopin' carbon sequestration potential. Trees, as I presume you know, store carbon, that byproduct of modern industrial life we keep farting up into the stratosphere. And since bigger trees, broadly speaking, store more carbon, just how big of a carbon sink is the Mega Goomba home tree? Now to get to the big juicy research paper of this episode. Above ground biomass dynamics and growth efficiency of Sequoia sempervirens forests. Or as I like to call it, abagesef. Now this paper was not specifically about carbon sequestration, but for the sake of this exercise, I'm just gonna say the whole weight is carbon. How exactly do you weigh a tree? With a lot of grad students and a very big grant. So according to their research, a big ol' honkin' redwood like this one is like 700 and something years old, it's about 320 feet tall, and it weighs 246 metric tons. So if the Mega Goomba tree accumulated mass in the same way that redwoods do, and it wouldn't, not because it's a fictional thing that I just made up, but because it's a deciduous tree and that screws up all the math, then it would have a total biomass of 5,198 tons. And that is equivalent to the annual carbon emissions of Goldfield, Nevada. It's about 350 people who live there. Nearest accommodation is the Clown Motel. And so for Goombas to solve climate change, we simply need to instantaneously materialize 173 million Mega Goomba trees. But in the end, it doesn't really matter, because Goombas aren't chestnuts. They aren't shiitake mushrooms either. That's a cover-up by Big Tendo. They're chaka rooms, and in your heart of hearts, you already knew that. Also, I'm getting really nervous about the feds shutting this whole place down. If it all capsizes, where y'all going? Red rectangle or orange square? If I'm honest, I don't want to go to this one. It makes me queasy.